Dr. Phil has been doing this for 20 years. He's seen thousands of cases, heard every story imaginable, confronted liars, exposed frauds, reunited families. But what happened that Tuesday afternoon in Studio 29 made him do something he'd never done before: stop the cameras mid-show, walk off stage, and demand his entire production team meet him in the back room immediately. The item that caused this? A simple payroll stub. A piece of paper that would connect two families who had no idea they were connected at all. It started like any other taping. Rebecca Morrison, 43, sat on the famous Dr. Phil couch, tissues already in hand. She'd come to the show with what seemed like a straightforward issue. Her husband David had been acting distant for months, working late nights, being secretive about his phone. "Dr. Phil, I think he's having an affair," Rebecca said, her voice cracking. "I found receipts, unexplained charges, late-night texts he deletes immediately." The audience murmured sympathetically. Classic case. Dr. Phil leaned forward in his chair, preparing to deliver his trademark direct questioning. "Have you confronted him?" Dr. Phil asked. "He denies everything. Says I'm paranoid, that I'm imagining things." What nobody knew, not Rebecca, not the audience, not even Dr. Phil, was that David Morrison was in the green room at that very moment, waiting to come on stage. And he had documents with him. Dr. Phil signaled to the producer, "Let's bring David out." David Morrison walked onto the stage, a tall man in his late 40s, wearing a pressed button-down shirt, looking nervous but determined. He didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he pulled a manila folder from under his arm. "Rebecca, I need to show you something," David said, his voice shaking. "I haven't been having an affair. I've been trying to find someone." Rebecca's face twisted in confusion. "Find who?" David opened the folder and pulled out a single piece of paper. "My sister." The studio went completely silent. "I don't understand," Rebecca said, wiping tears. "You're an only child. You've always said—" "I was told I was an only child," David interrupted. 3 months ago, I took one of those DNA ancestry tests. Just for fun. And it matched me with someone. A half-sister. Same father." Dr. Phil stood up, his expression shifting from clinical interest to genuine curiosity. "David, walk me through this." David's hands trembled as he held the paper. "Her name is Jennifer. Jennifer Hayes. She lives 2 towns over from us. She's 38. And she's been looking for family her entire life." But what Dr. Phil said next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. "Wait," Dr. Phil said, his face changing. "David, what did you say her last name was?" "Hayes. Jennifer Hayes." Dr. Phil turned to his producer off camera. "Maria, can you come here for a second?" The cameras kept rolling as Dr. Phil walked to the edge of the stage, speaking in hushed tones with his producer. The studio audience watched in confused silence. Rebecca sat frozen on the couch. David stood awkwardly center stage. Dr. Phil returned, and his face was pale. "David, I need to see that folder." David handed it over. "Dr. Phil flipped through the papers, DNA results, ancestry reports, family tree charts. And then he stopped. His finger rested on something at the bottom of the stack. Is this what I think it is?" Dr. Phil asked, holding up a single sheet of paper. It was a payroll stub. An old one. Yellowed with age. Dated 1985. "I found it in my father's belongings after he died last year," David explained. "It's from the factory where he worked. I kept it because— I don't know. It felt important." Dr. Phil stared at the document like he was looking at a ghost. "David, do you know what company this is from?" "Riverside Manufacturing." "Why?" Dr. Phil turned to the audience, then back to David. His voice was quieter now, almost reverent. "Because there's someone in our green room right now. Someone who came here today for a completely different reason. And her mother worked at Riverside Manufacturing. In 1985. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. Stop the tape. Dr. Phil said firmly. The cameras kept rolling, they always do, but the studio crew froze. Bring Jennifer Hayes out here. Now. The side door opened. A woman in her late 30s walked out, confusion written all over her face. She had auburn hair, blue eyes, and a nervous smile. She'd been scheduled to appear in the next segment, a story about workplace discrimination. Jennifer, Dr. Phil said gently, I need you to look at this man. Jennifer Hayes looked at David Morrison. Their eyes met. And in that moment, without a word, they both knew. Your mother, Dr. Phil said to Jennifer, his voice steady but soft. Her name was Linda Hayes. She worked at Riverside Manufacturing in 1985. Is that correct? Jennifer nodded, tears already forming. Yes. She died when I was 10. I barely remember her. Dr. Phil held up the payroll stub. This document shows 2 employees. David's father, Thomas Morrison, and your mother, Linda Hayes. They worked the same shift. The same department. The same year you were born. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The math was simple. Brutal. Undeniable. Jennifer's knees buckled. A production assistant rushed forward with a chair. She sat down hard, her hands covering her face. David took 3 steps toward her, then stopped, unsure. Jennifer? She looked up at him through tears. I've been alone my whole life. Foster care. No family. I did the DNA test hoping to find anyone. Anyone at all. I got the same match. David said, his voice breaking. I didn't know what it meant. I thought maybe it was a mistake. But then I started digging. I found adoption records that were sealed. I found gaps in my father's history. And then I found this. He pointed to the payroll stub still in Dr. Phil's hand. Dr. Phil sat down on the arm of Rebecca's couch. His wife Rebecca, the woman who'd come here thinking her marriage was falling apart, was now watching her husband discover a sister he never knew existed. Rebecca, Dr. Phil said gently, did you know David was searching for this? Rebecca shook her head, tears streaming. I thought he was having an affair. The late nights, the secrecy. He was protecting me from this. I didn't know how to tell you, David said to his wife. I didn't know if it was real. I didn't want to hurt you with something that might be nothing. Jennifer stood up shakily. Can I see it? The payroll stub? Dr. Phil handed it to her. Her fingers traced the faded ink. Linda Hayes. Department 4B, shift supervisor. She never told me about him. Jennifer whispered. About any of this. She raised me alone. We struggled. And she never said a word about David's father. But what happened next is something that would change both families forever. Dr. Phil pulled a card from his jacket pocket. Jennifer, David, I want you both to know something. This show isn't just about exposing problems. It's about solving them. I have a team of genetic counselors, family therapists, and investigators who can help you both understand what happened. Why your mother made the choices she made. Why David's father kept this secret. He handed the card to Jennifer first, then one to David. You two have just found each other. That's a gift. A miracle. Don't waste it trying to figure this out alone. The studio audience erupted. Not an applause, not yet. But inaudible gasps, sniffles, the sound of 200 people collectively holding their breath. Dr. Phil turned to Rebecca. And you? You came here thinking your marriage was over. Instead, you just gained a sister-in-law. How do you feel about that? Rebecca stood up, walked across the stage, and without hesitation, wrapped Jennifer in a hug. Welcome to the family, she said through tears. The room exploded in applause. Dr. Phil stepped back, letting the moment happen. Jennifer and David stood side by side, awkward but connected. Rebecca held Jennifer's hand. 3 people who'd been strangers 20 minutes ago, now bound by blood and circumstance. Dr. Phil addressed the camera directly. You know, I've been doing this show for 2 decades. I've seen people at their worst. I've confronted liars. I've watched families tear each other apart. But every once in a while, you get a moment like this, where the universe just lines up. He held up the payroll stub again. This piece of paper is 40 years old. It's been sitting in a box for decades. And today, it brought 2 siblings together. That's not coincidence. That's fate. Jennifer turned to David. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you look like him? Our father? David pulled out his phone, scrolled to a photo, and showed her. It was an old picture, black and white, of a man in his 30s. Jennifer's breath caught. I have his eyes, she whispered. You have his smile, David replied. Dr. Phil gestured to the producer again. Bring out the box. A production assistant walked on stage carrying a small wooden box. Dr. Phil took it carefully and opened it in front of Jennifer and David. Inside were more payroll stubs. Dozens of them. All from Riverside Manufacturing. All from 1984 to 1986. I had my team pull these from the company archives this morning, Dr. Phil explained. Your father and your mother worked together for 3 years. Same shift. Same breaks. Same department. This wasn't a one-time thing. They knew each other. Jennifer picked up one of the stubs. Her mother's name was on it. Why didn't she tell me? Dr. Phil sat down between them. I can't answer that, Jennifer. But I can tell you this, your mother made choices to protect you. Maybe she thought it was better you didn't know. Maybe she was scared. Maybe your father was married, David, was he? David nodded slowly. He married my mom in 1983. Jennifer was born in 1986. The pieces fell into place. The timeline was clear. The secret made sense, even if it hurt. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Dr. Phil stood and addressed the studio one final time. This family has a lot of healing to do. A lot of questions to answer. And I'm going to make sure they get the support they need. Jennifer, you're not alone anymore. David, you have a sister. Rebecca, you have a bigger family than you woke up with this morning. And all of you have a second chance. He turned to the camera. If you're watching this at home, and you've done one of those DNA tests, and you've found a match you can't explain, don't ignore it. Don't run from it. Reach out. Because somewhere out there, someone is looking for you too. The show wrapped. The cameras stopped. But the family stayed on stage for another 20 minutes, talking, crying, exchanging phone numbers, making plans to meet for dinner that weekend. In the months that followed, Dr. Phil's team stayed in touch with both families. Jennifer moved closer to David and Rebecca. They introduced her to David's children, her niece and nephew. She attended family dinners, holidays, birthdays. For the first time in her life, she had a place to belong. David learned more about his father's past. It wasn't easy. There were uncomfortable truths about infidelity, choices made, lies told. But there was also understanding. His father had lived with that secret his entire life. And in his final days he'd left behind the one clue that would bring his children together. The payroll stub, the simple piece of paper that started it all, was framed. It hung in Jennifer's living room, a reminder that sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest weight. And Dr. Phil? He kept a copy of that payroll stub in his desk drawer. Whenever a case felt hopeless, whenever he doubted whether the show was making a difference, he'd pull it out and remember, sometimes, you don't need a DNA test. Sometimes, you don't need a dramatic confession. Sometimes, all you need is to pay attention to the details. Because the truth is always there. You just have to be willing to look. Years later, Jennifer Hayes Morrison, she'd taken David's last name, appeared on the show again. This time, to talk about adoption, foster care, and the importance of finding family. She brought her niece and nephew with her. She brought Rebecca. And she brought the payroll stub. "This piece of paper changed my life," she said, holding it up for the cameras. "It gave me a brother. It gave me a family. It gave me a history I never knew I had." Dr. Phil smiled. "And all because your mother and David's father worked the same shift 40 years ago." "All because someone kept a payroll stub," Jennifer corrected. Dr. Phil nodded. "All because someone kept a payroll stub." The legacy of that moment rippled outward. The episode became one of the most watched in the show's history. Thousands of people reached out to estranged family members. DNA testing companies reported a surge in people searching for biological relatives. And Dr. Phil's team developed a new protocol for handling cases where hidden family connections might exist. Because sometimes, the most powerful revelations don't come from confrontation. They come from a piece of paper. A name on a list. A stub from a paycheck 40 years old. And a willingness to ask the right questions at the right time. The story of Jennifer Hayes and David Morrison proved something Dr. Phil had always believed: every person deserves to know where they come from. Every person deserves to find their family. And every person deserves a second chance at connection, no matter how much time has passed. The payroll stub stayed framed on Jennifer's wall. A symbol of chance. Of fate. Of the thin thread that connects us all, even when we don't know it's there.